Hello guys, welcome to Development Economics. This is lecture 5. We continue with the impact evaluation, and this lecture is dedicated to randomized controlled trials, or RCT. First, let's list all the methods we're going to cover. So there are 7 major methods of impact evaluation. Number 1 is RCT, and that we're going to talk in this lecture. The other one, actually all others we use when RCT is not available. So the next one is matching method, or propensity score matching in particular, or PSM. That we'll cover in next lecture. So just name the methods. The next one is difference in difference, or diff in diff. And after that we have rollouts, which is kind of subcase of diff and diff, that this one we won't cover in our lectures, as it's partly subcase of diff and diff and it's a bit too complicated for this course. Then we have regression discontinuity index, or RDD. So they're all called by the abbreviation RCT, RDD, PSM. We have event analysis. This is an example that used last lecture. If we have a global financial crisis, or we have a hurricane, or we have political change, what is the impact of these major events? There are specific approach to that. And the last one is instrumental variables, or IV. So there are 7 methods. Few we're gonna skip, and a few we're gonna study in more details. And one of them, in particular, event evaluation, we're gonna use for our final project. So all these methods require quite a lot of data on the beginning and data analysis. So we will not actually exercise all of them in our course, but for you you need to understand what they are, how they look like, what's the logic behind them, and to be able to read reports based on those methods. And event evaluation is relatively easy, and we're gonna use that in our final project. So let's start with RCT, randomized controlled trials. This is the gold standard for the impact evaluation, the best method, and all others we use when this one is not available. And so you can logically guess that it's quite demanding in terms of conditions when it could be used. So the logic behind RCT is very simple. How you gonna, if I ask you, you don't know anything about impact evaluation, if I ask you, let's say this is a drug, how you gonna know whether the drug works? What's the impact of this drug? Or there is a program, policy, what's the impact of this policy? What would you do? It's quite logically, well, let's give this drug to, I don't know, if there are 1,000 people eligible for the drug, they need a drug, well, let's give 500 people this drug, and let's not give to other 500 people, and let's see what's the difference. So that is RCT. Randomized stands for that you will select those people who are eligible, who are treated. So they're all eligible. You select a treated group, and treated, we call it again, not only in medication, but in any type of impact evaluation. This is the term we call the treated, those who are given the drug or the policy applied to those people. And then we have a control group. So we have treated and control. So 1,000 people eligible, we select 500 randomly. That's the key. We select randomly 500, we give them a drug or give them loan if it's a policy, and so on. The other 500, we don't do anything, but it's important, we keep following up with them. We need the data from them as well, not only from to whom we gave the drug or applied the policy, we also need the data from our control, how they are doing. So this allows us to capture the difference. So you already see, oh, okay, here one group treated, one group not treated, and then after 2 or 3 years, depending on whatever you try to estimate, you see the difference, you calculate the difference, here you are. That's the impact of your program. That's very easy. That's the logic behind RCT. And the problems with that, it's not working quite often. Again, the control group, it's quite a challenge. First, you need to randomly divide people between controlled and treated. Not always possible. Second, the control group itself, not always possible. Not many people will be happy to follow up with you if you didn't give them a drug or didn't give them a loan, didn't say, well, you're going to be in a control group. No one wants to be in a control group. They applied for the policy, they applied for the program, and instead of getting the program, they're in control. So that's a main challenge. The control group, the treated group is kind of, okay, they got what they wanted, but the control group is there where the challenge is, and other methods have a bit different approach to control group, and some of them can work even without a control group. So one of the programs that examples of the RCT was that program of World Bank in Mexico called Progresa, when the incentive was the World Bank or the representative were giving some cash payments to mothers of children if they allow their children go to school. So again, they were selected in the rural area, of course, not in city. So in rural area, that was a huge problem because children were working in the field and parents didn't want them to go to school. Maybe they wanted, but again, it's a necessity of surviving. So instead, what was proposed, parents received some cash payments and their children went to school. So that was designed, and again, World Bank as an institution that provides this program, they have motivation originally design the program in a way that they can exercise their RCT. They can use the best method. So, and that program, the impact of that program was very positive. It was in around 2000, so from 1998 to 2000, 2 years of the program in hard times for Latin America, and the program was quite successful, and there was a significant impact of the children, increase of children went to school. So the goal of the program, again, it is important to understand that we estimate the impact of the program, not just, we try to estimate all the impacts, but we also focus on the primary goal. It's quite often that some other goal were achieved, but the primary goal was not achieved. So maybe the poverty were reduced, but there are not many children in school. So somehow they trick the system. So that's another problem, that people designing social policies and so on, they always think, oh, the people will be fair, but unfortunately that's not the case, and especially, well, probably not especially for poor people, but the programs are designed for poor people, and we have a lot of evidence that people are not fair. They are not acting even in their own best in the long term. They're acting in their like short-term gains, and they try to trick the system. So let's say they take money and they don't send child to a school, or they enroll a child to a school, but then the child actually don't go to a school, and so on. So you need a lot of strict policies. The other example was, I believe it was Philippines. There was another World Bank initiative that it turned out that poor people, even in rural areas, there were problems with land. So the poorest, they didn't have any land, and they had to pay rent for landowners. And that, again, this economists thought, well, that's what makes them poor, because they don't have their own land, and so they had to rent the land from a landowner. So they basically work like a medieval peasants. They don't own the land. They have to work so hard to pay the rent for the landlord. So the World Bank introduced a policy. Okay, there is some part of government land. They coordinated with the government, and let's say, okay, we just give each peasant a piece of land. That program was actually popular also in Ukraine, where I'm from. Everyone got a piece of land under the decommunization, when we went from a government economy, centralized economy, to a market economy. Everyone got a piece of land, at least something. But what happened in the Philippines, that most of the poor people, they got a piece of land and then they sold it to a landowner for a short gain, and then they still have no land and they don't work there, and they still are in the same problem. They got maybe and they sold it, of course, without even understanding the price. They sold it very cheap, like $100 or something. They got $100 to $1,000 for that piece of land, and they basically wasted the whole program. And why? Because people were not acting responsibly. So that's like a example that's not often you get what you planned for. So RCT tries to capture, so the best method, because it has a very strong this control group. You follow up with control group, and you have the strict difference. So again, random is the best way to select. So you select people purely random. However, another challenge. So we have lots of challenge. What is random is also unfortunately not that easy to understand. You say, well, I just like pick up every second guy, but it turned out that not necessary. For example, again, talking from experience from the cancer center, you have what is usually done, they randomize by doctors instead of patients, because patient of one doctor, they talk to each other about the treatment, and then the people refuse to participate unless they're going to be treated. So that's just a simple example that just kills your RCT. You cannot reach the control group enough. Another thing that control group is, again, it's people. So they think, oh, I'm in control group, but I can go to some other place and get some alternative, either treatment or get some loan. Maybe I'm not getting the loan from World Bank, but what if I get a loan from a state government, or what if I do something else? So those control group, again, a bit of problematic. But again, RCT is the main method to use. So if you're able to construct, in particular control group, again, if you're able to do that, to enforce that they will stay controlled, sometimes you even pay to a control group to stay the way it should stay, not to get alternatives, well, not in medication, again, not in terms of treatment, but in terms of social programs. You just stay, well, try not to do anything, just do what you regularly do, and then you got some benefits after that, after the program. So you pay them to participate in that. So that's the main challenge for the RCT. One of the benefits to use it, or not to use, one of the ways where it could be used is a natural experiment. That's a quite beneficial thing that you, as a researcher, you can find. It's a naturally existing event or something that happened that allows to use RCT. So usually it's any event that happened locally, so not like a global financial crisis that affect pretty much everyone, but locally that affect, let's say, village A, but not village B, that created a natural treated and control group. So in this case, you don't need to enforce it, you kind of use the natural data. And that's very often economists use for such, look for such situations. Instead of artificially creating this treated control, they use for some natural occurring differences, and then study what happened, what's the impact of that event that caused this, or they can even use it, like if there is naturally different groups, they can just provide a program to let's say one of the group, and then estimate the impact of the event, and then estimate the impact of their program. So separate. It's a bit more complex, but I hope you get the idea. So you need two groups of people, and along the program they should stay as they are. They shouldn't mix, and that's quite a lot of challenge. For business, we also use that quite a lot. If you test new products, that's consumer products, that's pretty much again a standard. RCT, you select randomly people, you give them products, a new version of iPhone instead of old version iPhone, they always test, oh I like this more, or I like this, or I don't see any difference. So that's a very typical, and again more typical even for food, they always give you to try, random people, try this, try that, combine, get the results, see, oh people prefer this, people don't like it. So all this marketing research are based on RCT. So again, very powerful tool, but as you will see from other methods, not always works. So other methods cover when RCT is either costly, it's not always the case that it's impossible, it's sometimes it's just very expensive, but that's the case, not always works as it should. So there are a few problems with RCT, and in particular let's go through 5 of them. So we have what's called half-tone effect, HAWTHORNE. So this name of a scientist. So the effect is that the people who are treated, they change their behavior just because they are treated. Imagine someone put a webcam in your house, in your living room. I bet your behavior will change. Even though the goal, let's say they put the camera there to check how often you drink water, whatever, any idea, but you will behave differently knowing that someone is watching you. And sometimes this already has a positive impact. So a lot of with these social anti-poverty programs, that's what the case. If you're already a member of the World Bank, give you a loan, but it's more important that the World Bank paid attention to you, that you are selected, you are a winner of this lucky ticket. So you will work way harder to perform good, especially if you know, oh, if you will be successful, then probably World Bank maybe do something more for you. But even the fact that you are selected sometimes give people such motivation that they perform better even without a loan. So it's not actually it's even harder. It's the impact of your program, but not of the idea of the program that it was designed. It's not the money that you gave them that made the difference. It actually the program itself, that you select them to a program and they felt happy, maybe they were lonely and thought no one cared for them, and then you selected them, they feel empowered and they perform better even without your money. So that effect is really hard to capture, because again it is a part of your program, impact of your program. So if you use RCT, that will result that that's your program benefit. However, in fact, it's not what you intended to estimate. You want to estimate where I use money effectively or not. So maybe if they just need attention, then you just need to reconstruct it, have another program, maybe just send them some speech speakers that have empowering speech, will provide them empowering speeches or something like talk to them. So that's one of the problems. The other one is John Henry effect. That's for control. So I already mentioned that when a control group kind of feel disadvantaged, that they are not being treated, they seek for some kind of alternatives, or they just work harder. That's another thing. Like, you know, we will give these loans randomly, but unfortunately, another psychological thing, people do not believe in this random. You tell them, I will randomly select, 5 people out of class, and I give them $100. And it's in our brain, we do not believe in this random. If we are selected, we think, yeah, we are the best. If we are not selected, we think, no, that's on purpose. That wasn't random. They disadvantage us. That's because they think I'm not the best. So people, some of them, I guess not all, but some of them are motivated by the being not selected. If they're not selected, they work harder. They say, well, I'm going to be better. I'm going to show them. So, and in these social programs, that's very important. So basically the first, this Hawthorne effect, is when the treated behave differently for some other reasons. But the John Henry effect is because the control group start behaving differently, or at least some part of the group start behave differently because they were not selected. The other one is spillovers effect and contamination effect. So again, it's related to some other actions that either treated or control take or do that are not directly affected or result of the program or intention of the program, but are likely to happen. So again, if you provide loans for business, then people might send their kids to school, for example, better or something. And then there will be some other spillover effects. So everything is interconnected in social environment. So that's an important thing, and it's very hard to track down. You think it will go this way, but it might not. So again, as I said, with the example in the Philippines and the land, they thought there was also an alcohol problem there and kind of not nice behavior of those people. So they thought, oh, we give them land, they will be occupied and they will work harder and they will get rid of those problems. But they sold the land, get money, spend money, wasted money on alcohol, drugs, and whatever. So the problem gets worse. So you intended to do good, but actually you can give a junkie additional money, spend on drugs, and you make it worse if it's possible. So that's an example of this spillovers effect. And you don't think and you can't predict, but unfortunately happens. Again, RCT cannot capture that. We have a dropout effect. So again, I was mentioned that before. If people that are not treated or treated in both groups, people can drop out. If they drop out randomly for reasons that are not related, it's fine. If someone got a job, drop out. If someone moved out, it's fine. But if there is a systematic dropout, if the weakest people who are given treatment drop out because they couldn't catch up with they couldn't effectively make this program work, or if there is such thing, if they're weak, especially probably the weakest, dropping out, then you will have your estimation will be biased upwards. So you think a program will do better because the weakest drop out, but the RCT will not capture it, because what it does, it just by the end of the program you take the difference. So those who were if they drop out and they are the weakest, you will not capture that. That's a problem. And we have also the what's called pioneer effect or the timing effect. It's interesting, but with most of such social programs, the impact is different depending on time when you estimate. So of course you try to estimate this with time, every time, not just once. But what happens? You treat it, you estimate like 6 months. Oh, it shows you a big difference. There is some difference, positive. You are so happy. Then in let's say 2 years, it's still positive, but less positive. So this means, oh, there was a huge positive impact in the beginning, but then it started actually reducing and reversing because the control starting to catch up. So there is such the timing is important. So it's called a pioneer because the pioneer effect might be different from the long-term effect. And it might go also the other way around, which is more desirable and very kind of financially reasonable, is when, again, if you take children and schooling program, you send children to school, they stop working in the field. So in the short run, this household will experience actually decrease of funding because children are not working. Parents either should work harder, which probably is not possible because they're already on their limits. So the household will have less food. That's why it's important to provide them some additional support. So the pioneer effect, the first even couple of years might be negative, but then more educated children can bring some value to their parents. Usually, even without finishing school, they can educate some particular skills about, I don't know, how more effectively use the resources they have. So there's some positive effect and will be seen in 2 3 years, and then in 10 years when the child finish the school and get a better job, then you have a tremendous positive impacts, but you need to wait for a long time for that. So that's quite a problematic thing. So what else we have? Pretty much here we'll finish with RCT, and next we're going to talk about some other topics, some other methods of impact evaluation. Thank you and good luck.